Hello and welcome to another whiskey review with me, the Whiskey Novice. Thank you for joining me for review number 170, and for now the end of a series looking at some Scotch single malt 10-year-olds. If you're wondering just out of curiosity if it's getting warmer here in Frosty Towers, the answer is hell no. It would skin you. As a matter of fact, when I came in, there was a brass monkey over there checking its insurance policy. It is so damned cold. So let's get into this and see if we can get a little heat into me, shall we? What are we looking at? Teaninich 10-year-old from Diageo. A sort of Northern Highland one there, around Alness, not a million miles away from Dalmore Distillery. So yes, Diageo. So what are we looking at? Well, chill filtered, yeah. Colour added, yeah. Bottled at 43%, this one. Teaninich is another one of those ones. It's the Flora Fauna range, but it's one of those ones from Diageo where it's supposed, you would say, Teaninich's sort of technically blend fodder. It's one of those distilleries that's making blend fodder for the Diageo blends. However, earlier this year, 2022, we're now at the end of 2022, but the beginning of this year, there was an awful lot of folk talking about Teaninich, particularly indie bottlings of it. And that's what got my interest peaked. And as I said, I think recently about another, it was probably in this series, I think it was about the Ben Nevis 10, that I would rather find my way with a official bottling before I go down the line of the indie bottlings. And that's what I've done here, once again. Now, I've had indie bottlings of this, but, you know, for the purposes of reviewing, I'd still rather go down the path of the official bottling. So, Teaninich, as I said, distillery there in the Northern Highlands. A bit of a rarity in that they don't have a mash tun. I believe they're the only Scottish distillery to not have a mash tun. They use another process, which escapes me right now. I'm sure somebody will. I do know this process, and it involves where they basically end up with a completely clear wort. They've no, they're not actually taking off a draft or anything from the wort. So there's something. It's a masher, hammer, something. I do know this, but I just can't remember. So before I lead myself down another hole and dig myself a little deeper, I'll just get into this whiskey, shall I? Sweet, floral, creamy and green. Slightly perfumed, but not off-putting. Marshmallow, red apple. It almost is a little Highland / Speyside generic, in that if I was nosing this blind, I would have said it was a Speyside, a good Speyside, but Speyside or Highland. But either way, don't let that put you off, because it's even though I'm saying the word generic, it's still good. Now, good, yes, but a prime example of even better when independently bottled, in my opinion. I'll not say a whole lot more for now. Maybe not say a whole lot more later on, but finishing off with hints of cardboard and perhaps pine. There's definitely a little piney tint off it there. It's a slightly sharp, although soft too. Sweet and sour arrival. At first it's all rather fleeting, if tasty, but just fleeting. That taste doesn't hang around long. Any fruits are those of the soft variety, mandarin orange, white grape perhaps. And they play around with a cereal note. And that slight cardboard hint that was on the nose also shows up on the palate. Once again, not terribly off-putting, but it's definitely there. And it all comes to a head in a relatively short, slightly peppery, slightly forgettable finish, I would suggest. Any memories would be of that cereal note, but the sweetness tends to dissipate in the finish. I'm adding a little water. It's only 43%, but when I was doing my tasting notes, I was very, very surprised about how much water opened this up and how it changed it up. Now, if I were you, I would give it a chance to settle a while. I did when I was doing my tasting notes. It takes time in the glass. This gets better and better and better the longer it sits in the glass. I know for a fact it does. I know you would hear us saying about a minute in the glass for every year in the cask, so 10 minutes. I would happily give this 20 minutes, half an hour in the glass before going at it, because I discovered when I was doing my tasting notes, the longer it sits, it just gets better and better. And water reveals a stronger, a more hefty nose, less airy-fairy, for the want of a better term. It's richer. The sweeter notes become that of juicy fruit gum and even freshly squeezed orange juice. And weirdly, and I actually did as I usually do, I read a couple of other reviews after I'd written my own tasting notes, because I always like to see if what line up in any way. I can't remember whose it was that I read, where they said that they thought they got a slightly smoky note off this. And the thing is, I believe it actually says on the label about it being smoky. Now, there's no peat involved in the drying of the malt here, but whatever way they've manipulated this, it does actually, and I didn't necessarily get it in the tasting notes, but I can understand where they're coming from. You would almost believe, that there has been a hint of peat used in this. The palate, although I'm going to say substantially thin, it definitely thins, obviously, with the water. Once again, reveals more with the addition of water. Orange, chocolate, even a slightly bitter cherry or marzipan. And yet again, just gets better. Finish remains much the same, although that marzipan note is now showing up there. So definitely a touch, just a little touch of water in this has improved it. So I would recommend, even though it's 43%, don't be scared to add a little bit of water. Teaninich, I'll be watching out for. I will be picking up those indie bottlings of it. I'm impressed with the spirit. It's not the only one from Diageo. Indeed, it's not the only one within the Flora Fauna range that I will be watching and reviewing at later dates. Diageo do have their finger on a pulse. I know there's a lot of us would sort of avoid Diageo a bit because they're such a big concern, and who wants to line the pockets of those who already own everything? But look, they don't just pick up these distilleries on a whim. They know what they're doing. So you know, it would certainly get, Teaninich would get my recommendation. Yes, sirree, it would. So we'll leave it at that and move on. So yes, that would suggest that I like this, and I do like it. That, I said earlier about the generic Speyside Highland thing, that does give way through time. When this relaxes in the glass, it becomes its own character. It starts to, you know, become a thing all its own, and a good thing. I also said about indie bottlings. I said I might come back to it. My first recommendation to you would be, if you've bought a bottle of Teaninich 10-year-old, the Flora Fauna range, and you liked it, my first thing I would suggest to you is go out and look for the indie bottlings. I know James Eady do one. I know there's a Signatory one. They've probably all got them. You know, probably every indie bottler's had a touch of Teaninich somewhere. So you'll easy enough to find one, and they're not that overly expensive. But if you want another official bottling as a recommendation, well, for me it would be a Knock 12-year-old. There were a few that I could have went to, because it has got a hint of a generic feel about it, as does a Knock. But when you give them time, they're both whiskies that, given time, are standout whiskies. For me, give it time in the glass. Teaninich 10-year-old will stand out. A Knock 12-year-old will stand out. At first, yes, they're a bit sweet, honey. As I said, a lot of the notes that I mentioned for the Teaninich, marshmallow, even you get the vanilla notes, etc. But they are good. Both of them good individual representatives whenever you give them chance to work. And when I was doing my tasting notes, I was tasting the Teaninich. I knew I had a few options in my cabinets to go to as an alternative, and it was when I got to a Knock 12-year-old in a glass, and I thought, yeah, that's a good, in my opinion, a good recommendation as an alternative to Teaninich 10-year-old Flora Fauna. So there you go. It's cold. I'm struggling a bit here. Well, I'm trying to hide it. A good whiskey does help, and this is a good whiskey. So yes, I would highly recommend it. 45 to 55 pounds. If it was closer to 40, it would be better. At 45, yeah, okay. 55 is a bit of a push, maybe. But certainly check it out. I'll leave it at that. Say thank you very much for joining me. I'll be back soon with a new series of something else. Until then, pleasure to be with you as always. Thank you very much to my patrons. Should you wish to join that group, the details are in the video description below. Till the next time, my friends, here's your good health. Cheers. Hey, thanks for watching my video. Please click and subscribe to be notified of further content.